Thank you so much for joining us here on The Dwelling Show. I've got Chad Hudson with us today. How are you doing, Chad? Thank you so much for joining.
Man, I'm doing great. I'm alive and well and blessed, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
It's my absolute pleasure. Chad and I were just talking before the show about, we're actually recording this on a Sunday afternoon, and it just kind of shows, the grind and how much we love what we do. So it's not work. It's for me, I was telling Chad, it's a 24-hour business, and he could relate to that as well.
Absolutely. It's there, the old adage of there's time to lean and time to clean. And I love both of them, but I love cleaning when everybody else is leaning. So people are
Yeah.
asleep or busy, and that's where you make your hay is on the weekends, I say, when everybody else is playing.
I love it. I love it. So Chad, I of course I could read your profile, but I'm sure you can do a fantastic job of telling our dual listeners a little bit more about you. I've got your face cap has got your company, several companies on. So can you just tell us a little bit more about, you, kind of your story and kind of what you've been up to lately?
Sure. Yeah. Savoy Companies, I founded in essentially 2000, and it's a real estate development company. And I build custom homes. I've as far as a broad definition of what we do, I've dabbled in just about every part or piece of real estate that you could do. I felt like I needed to do that to get my legs under me and have experience along the way. My wife and I have always invested in real estate and grew that part of Savoy organically as far as the real estate investing side. But on a day-to-day basis, I build custom homes in my area, and I turnkey them, whether it's a spec or a custom build job. And for the last 18 years, I've invested alongside with my wife in we started in single family condos and grew over time. And it's a pretty boring story, but that's exactly how I like it, and slow growth as far as wealth. And I knew, I'm sure you've heard this similar story, but in order for me to scale up and be to where we wanted to be, I had to peel the onion back and really look deep into it and see, am I doing this correctly? So we got up to about 44 units. And when you're young, your ego's pretty big and you think you can handle everything. And then I realized, you know what, this is, in order to be the type of goal and this type of success that I wanted to achieve, I knew I had to reach out and get help, and it become more of a team sport. So I'm in the multifamily aspect of investing. I had 44 units at one time, and it just got overwhelming with 44 meters, 44 water meters, 44 applications. And my goal was to get to 100. And I tell people all the time, I look very deep into the situation we're in. I started selling off a lot of my assets, and I turned those 44 units into about 2,500 units as far as apartments, and investing passively, learning the game, and then being a general partner on the last 3 transactions. So that's kind of in a nutshell. My day-to-day operation is I still run Savoy Builders and Savoy Companies as like I said, a real estate development company, but it allows me and my wife to invest and to be a part of the real estate investing side as far as multifamily.
Thank you so much, Chad. That was a really good introduction. So real quick though, I want to kind of rewind a little bit historically. Why real estate?
That's all I know. Backing up, as far as the story, I went to college. I was fortunate to play baseball at Texas A&M University, and got out of college with no debt. And I tell a very similar story all the time. I had a young lady who was my tenant, who was my landlord, and I always saw her walking around picking up rent. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to do. And she was a sweet old lady. She flew under the radar. she never talked about what she had. She was very, very, very generous as far as answering my questions. And I knew at the time I didn't know much about the market, didn't know much about stocks, bonds, et cetera. And I knew I knew I couldn't be in control if I went that route. So this lady was very helpful and shared her experience with me, and basically gave me a kind of a blueprint of how she did it. And her name is Margie Stabora. She's well into her late 80s now, but I just found it interesting that if she could do it and had the fortitude to teach me the blueprint that, so, I mean, I was at A&M for 4 years, and I tell people all the time, I learned more from her than I did the entire 4 years. And she was helpful. She shared a lot with me as far as what to do, what not to do. And I was off to the races. When I graduated, I knew I wanted to go into real estate investing, and I knew what I wanted to do as far as that. And fast forward 18 years later, it's been a fun journey. I've learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, but I never made a large enough one to fall on my face. So, the last 36 months, we've really grown with the multifamily, but I wouldn't trade the first 15 years before that, because it taught me a lot.
So you mentioned, your mentor in the early days, and I really just want to kind of tap into her kind of wisdom as well. So if you could remember, what was the one really good thing that you learned from her? And what was the other thing that you learned from her that she told you not to do? So what was the one thing she told you to keep doing in real estate, and what was the one thing that you should not do in real estate?
Well, the one thing by shadowing her, I saw her once a month. So if you're picking up money from somebody once a month, that's pretty sweet. And I didn't see any employees. Now maybe she had some behind the scenes, but I don't think so. She was a pretty tough woman, and she went over to pick up her money. And the whole time I watched her, she wasn't selling paper. She could touch and feel her product. So she was checking on us as much as she was anything, and making sure her investment was in good hands. So I watched what she did, saw her once a month. Again, there was some maintenance over there, and she would call it, but she wasn't getting dirty and wasn't doing the maintenance. So, to answer your question, I think the biggest thing is it looked pretty, I don't want to say simple, because nothing is simple, but it looked inviting for me because of those two things: that her investment was intact, and somebody was paying for her investment the entire time, and somebody was taking care of her investment. And as far as once a month, I mean, she didn't come around much more than that, other than pick up a check.
It is interesting, isn't it? And you mentioned something very fascinating at the beginning. Like, some folks don't really understand that wealth building or wealth creation can be a pretty boring process, right? And, in our world right now, there's so much glitz and glamour into wealth. But for the most part, building wealth is just usually a boring, kind of process. And when you mentioned that, and kind of you mentioned that the lady was kind of staying under the radar. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I think I'm a millennial, and our generation now with Instagram is like, wealth has to be flashy. You have to be wearing like, nice, jewelry and nice clothes. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious, because you mentioned that a couple of times.
I'm old school. I none of that stuff impresses me, Ola. And I learned from that generation beforehand that some of the most wealthiest people I've met, you would never know that they were wealthy, because they were boring. Now, that's not to say they didn't have fun, but they didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about their wealth. They went on. They kept their head down and their nose to the grindstone, and they had a rainy day fund. And as far as I laugh with, I don't get caught up in that, and I learn from those people that I know that are wealthy not to. Now, there's nothing wrong with Instagram or Facebook if that's what you like to do, but I, I think that the most wealthiest people probably live a pretty boring lifestyle. And if you were to ask them, he or she, um, that's the way they would want it to continue to be. So, you know, again, I'm old school. I don't like flash, and I don't care what you have or how much money you have. None of that impresses me. But I learned from the people that have money that's generally the people that have money and have wealth are the ones that don't talk much about it. And to add to that, I get a little upset with our school system because we're taught that money's evil and people that have money is evil. And some of the most generous, caring folks I know have money, and they're the biggest, philanthropists that there is. They give the most, but they don't talk about it, and you never know they give because of that reason. So, I do a very a due diligent job with my two girls to talk about money and to talk about a rainy day fund and to talk about before you make that purchase, do you really need that? Do you want that? And then how can you get it back? So, it's a big learning curve. I think the schools lack teaching that, but it's up to the parents to make up for that and teach the kids.
All right. Thank you so much for contributing to that. That was just a really interesting question in my mind that I thought I should ask you.
Absolutely.
So, I cannot be on the call with a custom home builder and not talk about, flips, right? In real estate, there might be some people who flip houses and listen to this show, and they might be thinking, well, can you give us a few tips on how to find good contractors? Sure, you probably have most of the guys that kind of stay with you for a while, but do you have any kind of like general tips in terms of like how to find and keep good contractors?
Absolutely. It's all transparency. It's very similar to multifamily investing. It's a team sport. And if your gut feels like you will not see this particular general contractor the next day, then find a different one. So you have to understand that most, I'm speaking probably out loud here, but most general contractors are week to week and they're looking for that Friday paycheck. So, it's not always about the cheapest. People get caught up in that, and then that's where they get burned. It's it's about references and having good communication. I've had the similar team put together for the last 18 years, all from the electrician to the plumber. I can have them over my house, and I have a good correlation with them. But it took time to develop that. What I see, the people that get burnt are the one-off people that just have one fix and flip or one build. And, back to the flashiness, general contractors or subs, if they see that, it turns them off and they think they can take advantage. Whether it's right or wrong, that's not for me to answer, but sometimes a lot of subs get turned off by that. So you have to get down and really get to know them and ask the right questions. And if your gut feels like, hey, I don't think this guy or girl's going to do a good job, then you walk. But I've never had an issue with a bad sub. I say that like I've noticed some sloppy work, and I would let them know, just like a parent or somebody did. If I did something wrong, they would let me know, and I'd say, hey, this is unacceptable. Let's correct it or fix it, and really get ahead of it. A lot of people are scared to ask questions, and that's how you get answers, is you directly look someone in the eye and ask them a question. But I've done many fix and flips before, the television shows, and when there was, back in the day when there was a lot of meat on the bone to make, and now it's, but as you know, that's a great way to make money. It's not a great way to build wealth. So anytime I've done that, I'd always basically made the money on a fix and flip, and I would put it over into a different category and go buy multifamily. So and I still do that. It's just, as you know, it's gotten a lot harder with a lot more competition, and I'm not afraid of competition. I think I'm like most veterans. It's waiting for maybe the market to correct and there to be a little bit better buys, because of the old adage is, if you're going to fix and flip, you make your money on the buy. You know that.
Absolutely. You make your money in the front end. So definitely this is kind of just the last segue of our talk here is, so you had 44 units. A lot of probably newbie investors will be thinking, wow, that is, what I would love to have. And then you said, hold on a sec, I'm going to, get rid of some of my assets and move this money into something called multifamily, my favorite asset class. How did you go about making that decision, and why did you choose multifamily? You could have chosen, any other kind of asset class, and, kind of talk a little bit more in terms of how did you select your sponsors and people you wanted to partner with as you
Sure.
moved into that class?
Absolutely. I was, and great question. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but I started out in the single family space, condo space, and it wasn't very long before after that, it wasn't very long afterwards that I realized I knew I loved the multifamily space. So I had a duplex, a triplex, and a quad, and then gradually went on to a 5-unit and then 16 units. So I knew right then, after what we talked about earlier about the 44 water meters, 44 bills, 44 insurance policies, etc., I knew the way to scale up was the multifamily class. And I never thought, that I could go that big until I learned the game. So I dealt with the 44 tenants, and that taught me so much, as far as from, in my entire career, I only had one eviction. And it was, I took a lot of pride in that, because if a tenant called me about something, I went over and I had it fixed. Remember, it was my asset. It was my investment, and I was the only one that was going to take care of my investment the most. So I knew when we started our family, I wanted a little bit more time. And again, here it is Sunday. I love to work and I love real estate, but I had 2 girls and I wanted to be there for them. So my time was eating up by really dealing with the tenant. So 36 months ago, my wife and I started selling off our assets and really just conforming that into a much larger multifamily space, which our first deal was 180 units, and we invested passively. So to answer your original question, I felt like if any sponsor was going to take me serious, that I needed to invest passively with them first before I started helping them. And then, so I invested with several sponsors across the board, and I really liked a few of them. And they started realizing that I had probably more skins on the wall than they did. So we had a good correlation. I had been doing this game longer than most of them. I felt like my resume was good enough to help out. And I started giving some feedback and raising some capital. And that's kind of where we are today. We have, all we have left is a 5-plex that I manage. And then we're up to 2,500 units. But I don't, I'll talk to anybody. If they're new, I get questions all the time about, hey, I really want to go into multifamily. Should I be a landlord first? And absolutely. You'll learn so much if you go buy a smaller plex, and then you'll know right away if you're cut out to be a landlord or not. But as you know, in order to get to the larger space, and get a seat at the table, you got to have a little cash, but there's a way to get there. You mentioned fix and flips. Your show's phenomenal for educating newbies and seasoned veterans. But you have to build up to that. And that, I'm not saying the way I did it was correct. It was the best way for me, because I'm confident now. I know the game, and I feel like I got the answers to the test, I like to say. And so I can look at a deal and see if it's a good deal or bad deal. And if I want to invest or if I want to actually jump in and be a general partner on the deal. And, but there's, as you know, real estate kind of gets broad, described in a nutshell, but only you can go so many different directions in real estate, and it's a broad definition. And that's what I love about it, because even if you make a mistake, you can generally, you might lose money, but you can make your way out of the investment to where you don't get hurt that bad, or you can hold on to it. The old, what's the quote that it's bailed me out many times, as far as, don't wait and buy real estate, or
buy real estate and wait.
Yeah, buy real estate and wait. Yep. And that saved me numerous times on some bad deals. But sorry to go off on a
No, I totally. I mean, this is one of the things I say as well. Is real estate investing is so forgiving, because it's an hard asset. You might have bought it wrong, but if you wait in there a little bit longer, you might still be able to make it out without losing your share, for the most part anyway.
No doubt. And it's a relationship business like anything else. And if you wait it out and say you make a bad investment and rent it out, and over time, I mean, the stats are there that you'll come out ahead, or at least break even. And a lot of people get, very intimidated by the fact of being a landlord or investing. But you know what? I was a landlord for 18 years. I still am, but I don't know one of the 2,500 tenants that I have now. I don't know their name. And it's just chapters and phases in life. It's, I used to want to know all their names, and now I want to know the asset. I want to know we're taking care of the tenant, and it's a great B+ class neighborhood, and there's growth there. And I want to know that the occupancy rate is good. I want to know that we have good insurance, and I want to make sure I get my dividend every month too. So, but it's a growth play, and there's nothing sexy about it, like we talked about earlier, but it's a lot of fun, and it gives you a lot of good time with your family, if that's important to you. And that's the most to me at this moment.
Right. I mean, real estate has been the surest way to build wealth in America for decades before we got here. So yeah, you just cannot go wrong with that kind of approach. So we definitely dwelling into the quick rounds. These are going to be quick questions and quick answers. You ready, sir?
You bet.
All right. First question: what makes Chad unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl? You could use your company as well.
I'm a farm boy from East Texas, and I kind of call it like I see it. And a lot of people appreciate that this day and age. I still say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am, no, sir. I back to the flashiness. I think a lot of people still genuinely like just the old school, kind of call it like you see it, and the honest approach. I'm not a big on social media. I'm just now kind of getting out there, but it's a bit of a rabbit hole chasing there, but it's a means to an end. I get it. I understand it. But I would say the biggest asset for me, and I try to teach my kids this, is there's always a deal, there's always a bad deal, and there's always something to do, and take your focus off of it. So I would say, back to your original question, is you need to learn to say no. I was getting asked to do many different things and getting pulled in many different directions. And I would say that it's okay to say no to things. And so my wife and I did a really good job of that early on in our marriage and our career. We focused on ourselves, our relationship, and we were pretty laser focused on what we wanted. So while a lot of our friends, the generations don't matter, whether you're whatever generation you are, you still go through the same process. I mean, we were asked to go to Vegas. We were asked to go to, I mean, you name it. You get asked to do many different things. The millennials are the same. They're going through that. You have to learn to say no. Now, I'm not saying don't have fun. I'm just saying you need to invest in yourself first. If you want to succeed and you want to build wealth, if you want to go through life week to week and not have a rainy day fund or a savings account or any product that will eventually be passive income for you, then you say yes to everything and go do everything that you can under the sun, travel, whatever. But I promise you, when you wake up when you're 50, you're going to regret it because you're not going to have anything. And if you're relying on our government, then you're in deep, deep trouble. You know, to answer your question along a roundabout way, I would say the biggest thing for me is to learn to say no to a lot of outside distractions.
All right. Second question. What was the last book that you read?
That wasn't very quick, was it?
It's okay. It's okay. No one has got a time counter. It's okay. Second question. What was the last book that you read? And what was the one thing that you picked out from that book?
The last book, I've really did a good job of, I love like your show, obviously is very easy to listen to in my truck. And to take the time to sit down and read a book was very important for me, especially as far as a goal. So I've peeled through a lot of books lately. The last book that I read actually was, let's see, I ended up finishing 3 at one time, but the Grant Cardone book, which is real estate, investing in real estate, which is, Grant gets a bad rap sometimes, but I like the guy and he speaks the truth, and he's going to rub people wrong because he is flashy, but don't kid yourself. That guy worked his tail off, and I think he's just now reaping the benefits of doing that. And so he can be flashy if he wants. I think he's got the money too. But his book was actually very good. I was shocked. But Grant Cardone, Real Estate Investing. But and then Paul Moore, The Perfect Investment. That's a multifamily investment book. I thought that was a very, very good book. And that was the last 2 that I read. Paul Moore, The Perfect Investment, was a fantastic book.
Awesome. Final question. Obviously, you've got several companies to run. You're investing, and of course, spending time with your wife and your beautiful kids. What do you do for fun?
Man, well, I'm a homebody. I like being home. I love being home with the family. We built our dream house. We're blessed. We travel when we can. We're not jet setting by any means, but we don't want to. So at this point in my life, I'm all about not only Savoy companies, but I'm about being the best dad that I can be, and husband. And I wouldn't be here without our Lord Savior. I'm into our faith is important, and it is. I don't have many hobbies. I like college football, but unfortunately that's only 3 months out of the year, but love being a dad. So far, we talked about chapters and where we're at, and that's the chapter I'm in, and it's important for me to be a good dad. And I think if I can do that and really teach my kids along the way the value of $1 and hard work, and I would be reluctant not to mention my wife. I try to on every show. She works her butt off too. She is a in-house corporate counsel attorney, and not only does she help Savoy, she gets up and goes to work daily and runs a in-house counsel. She's an attorney for a company and a great mother as well. So like I said, I'm blessed. I'm married up, and I always was fortunate to hang around smart people to learn. So, guys like yourself, and you can't be the smartest person in the room. If you are, then you need
You
to
gotta
find new
change rooms.
friends, right?
Yeah, you gotta change rooms. Thank you so much, Chad, for the kind words as well. So if there's somebody listening on our show, and they're thinking, wow, maybe they're somewhere in Texas or maybe just anywhere in the country, and they're thinking, I really like this Chad guy. I want to connect with him. I want to learn more. What is the best place people can reach out and connect with you?
Sure. You can reach me at savoycompanies.com. That's SAVOYCOMPANIES.com, or my email is chad@savoycompanies.com. I'm on LinkedIn, great platform there. And I have no problem talking to any generation. I've done it. It just takes one voice. Margie Stabora was for me to watch her. And, she was a huge, beacon of light for me as far as where my direction was headed, just by me shadowing her and watching her and asking her questions. So if I can help someone, especially a younger kid who wants some direction or maybe a little bit too scared to ask a question, I have no problem, and I would love to answer that question. Just shoot me an email, or you can find my phone number on the website. So
Thank you so much, Chad. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
You bet. Thank you for what you do. And hey, you keep hitting it hard. You grinding it out on Sunday with podcasts. So that's a way to get out in front and get ahead of the herd right there.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chad.
All right, buddy.